The Perks of Being a Wallflower, pages 34 through 36. November 23rd, 1991. Dear friend, do you enjoy the holidays with your family? I don't mean your mom and dad family, but your aunt and uncle and cousin family. Personally, I do. There are several reasons for this. First, I am very interested and fascinated by how everyone loves each other, but no one really likes each other. Second, the fights are always the same. They usually start when my mom's dad, my grandfather, finishes his third drink. It's around this time he starts to talk a lot. My grandfather usually just complains about black people moving into the old neighborhood. And then my sister gets upset at him, and then my grandfather tells her that she doesn't know what she's talking about because she lives in the suburbs. And then he says how no one visits him in his retirement home. And finally, he starts talking about all the family secrets, like how cousin so-and-so knocked up that waitress from the big boy. I should probably mention that my grandfather can't hear very well, so he says all of these things really loud. My sister tries to fight him, but she never wins. My grandfather is definitely more stubborn than she is. My mom usually helps her aunt prepare food, which my grandfather always says is too dry, even if it's soup. Then her aunt will cry and lock herself in the bathroom. There's only one bathroom in my great-aunt's house, so this turns to trouble when all the beer starts to hit my cousins. They stand twisted in bladder positions and bang on the door for a few minutes and almost coax my great-aunt out. But then my grandfather curses at something my great-aunt said, and the cycle starts all over. With the exception of one holiday when my grandfather passed out just after dinner, my cousins always have to go to the bathroom outside in the bushes. If you look out the windows like I do, you can see them, and it looks like they're on one of their hunting trips. I feel terribly sorry for the girl cousins and my other great aunts because they don't really have the bushes option, especially when it's too cold. I should mention that my dad usually just sits real quiet and drinks. My dad is not a big drinker at all, but when he has to spend time with my mom's family, he gets loaded, as my cousin Tommy says. Deep down, I think my dad would rather spend the holiday with his family in Ohio. That way he wouldn't have to be around my grandfather. He doesn't like my grandfather very much, but he keeps quiet about it. Even on the ride home, he just doesn't think it's his place. As the evening comes to an end, my grandfather is usually too drunk to do much of anything. My dad and my brother and my cousins carry him out to the car of the person who is least angry at him. It has always been my job to open doors for them along the way. My grandfather is very fat. I remember there was this one time that my brother drove my grandfather back to the retirement home and I rode along. My brother always understood my grandfather. He rarely got angry at him unless my grandfather said something mean about my mom or my sister or made a scene in public. I remember it was snowing really hard and it was very quiet, almost peaceful. And my grandfather calmed down and started talking a different kind of talk. He told us when he was 16, he had to leave school because his dad died and someone had to support the family. He talked about the time when he had to go to the mill 3 times a day to see if there was any work for him. He talked about how cold it was and how hungry he was because he always made sure his family ate before him. Things he said we just wouldn't understand because we were lucky. Then he talked about his daughters, my mom and my Aunt Helen. I know how your mom feels about me. I know Helen too. There was this one time, went to the mill, no work, none. Came home at 2 a.m, pissed and pissed. Your grandmother showed me the report cards. C+ average. These were smart girls. So I went into their room and I beat some sense into them. And when I was done, they were crying and I just held up the report cards and said, "This will never happen again." She still talks about it, your mother. But you know something? It never did happen again. They went to college, both of them. I just wish I could have sent them. I always wanted to send them. I wish Helen could have understand that. I think your mother did, deep down. She's a good woman. You should be proud of her. When I told my mom about this, she just looked very sad because he could never say those things to her. Not ever. Not even when he walked her down the aisle. But this Thanksgiving was different. It was my brother's football game, which we brought a VCR tape of for my relatives to watch. The whole family was gathered around the TV, even my great aunts who never watched football. I'll never forget the looks on their faces when my brother took the field. It was a mixture of all things. My one cousin works at a gas station, And my other cousin has been out of work for 2 years since he injured his hand. And my other cousin has been wanting to go back to college for around 7 years. And my dad said once that they were very jealous of my brother because he had a shot in life and was actually doing something about it. But in that moment, when my brother took the field, all that washed away and everyone was proud. At one point, my brother made a very big play on the 3rd down, and everyone cheered, even though some of us had already seen the game before. I looked at my dad, and he was smiling. I looked at my mom, and she was smiling, even though she was nervous about my brother getting hurt, which was strange because it was a VCR tape of an old game, and she knew he didn't get hurt. My great aunts and my cousins and their children, everyone was also smiling, even my sister. But there were only 2 people who weren't smiling, my grandfather and I. My grandfather was crying. The kind of crying that is quiet and secret. The kind of crying that only I noticed. I thought about him going into my mom's room when she was little and hitting my mom and holding up her report card and saying that her bad grades would never happen again. And I think I know that maybe he meant my older brother or my sister or me, that he would make sure that he was the last one to work in a mill. I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't know if it's better to have your kids be happy or not go to college. I don't know if it's better to be close with your daughter or make sure that she has a better life than you do. I just don't know. I was just quiet and I watched him. When the game was over and the dinner was finished and everyone said what they were thankful for, a lot of them had to do with my brother or family or children or God. And everyone meant it when they said it, regardless of what would happen tomorrow. When it came to my turn, I thought about it a lot because that was the first time sitting at the big table with the grown-ups since my brother wasn't here to take his seat. I'm thankful that my brother played football on television so nobody fought. Most of the people around the table looked uncomfortable. Some looked angry. My dad looked like he knew I was right, but he didn't want to say anything because it wasn't his family. My mom was very nervous about what her dad would do. Only one person at the table said anything. It was my great aunt, the one who usually locks herself in the bathroom. Amen. And somehow that made it all right. When we were all getting ready to leave, I walked up to my grandfather and gave him a hug on the kiss and a kiss on the cheek. He wiped my lip print off with his palm and gave me a look. He doesn't like the boys in the family to touch him, but I'm very glad that I did in case he dies. I never got to do that with my Aunt Helen. Love always, Charlie.